Welcome back to Coast Vue. I really enjoyed my conversation with Jeff Duncan. We're so fortunate to have the opportunity to visit with him. And, during the off season, like he said, there's really not an off season anymore. Things are always cooking big time as it relates to the Saints organization. And I'm not surprised what he said about the NFL and how, that they've become this Goliath, and over 80 shows, 80 programs of the top 100 TV programs are actually NFL games. It's pretty amazing, but also not necessarily surprising. Hey, so now let's move over to someone who's actually been on the show about a year ago, Thomas Mohrman, who is the Director of Marine Programs for the Nature Conservancy of Mississippi. And first of all, let me just say good morning to you. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the show today.
It's good to see you. Listen, we had gotten together about a year ago with our friend Alex Littlejohn, who's the executive director for the Nature Conservancy in Mississippi, and incidentally one of the top conservation leaders in the South. Alex is just a freak of nature, no pun intended. He's just a terrific leader, and I've enjoyed working with him on a number of fronts, not the least of which, of course, is the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that was passed into law and signed by the governor last year, and it's off and running really rapidly. But one of the things we talked about in that a year or so ago was to begin a program to recycle oyster shells, and they've made a lot of progress about that. So we're going to come back to that in just a second. But why don't we do this before we get started, Thomas? Remind people sort of what the Nature Conservancy is up to in Mississippi these days.
Sure. Thanks again for having me on the show. Alex Littlejohn sends his regards, and we appreciate you highlighting conservation issues in our state in general. The Nature Conservancy is a nonprofit organization. We have programs in all 50 states, and our mission is simply to conserve the lands and waters that are vital for life. In Mississippi, our program has three major focus areas. That's freshwater conservation, forest, and we have our coastal program, which is the project that I lead.
Yeah, and I'm amazed at the role you guys play. And of course, people will donate land to Nature Conservancy often. You're involved in, like for example, the Phil Bryant WMA, which is huge acquisition the state made. Nature Conservancy is up in the middle of that. You're really a facilitator of lands that could be set aside for conservation purposes and whatever. And that's sort of the history of the Nature Conservancy, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Our beginnings is in the what you would call a land trust organization. And we partner with state agencies pretty much everywhere we work throughout the country. Sometimes we have federal partners, sometimes we have academic partners, but a lot of times we'll work with these groups to protect lands that are important for state priorities and also high conservation value lands.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, incidentally, for our Facebook and YouTube audience, just kind of shift slightly to your right so we can get you centered. There you go. So, hey, what's your background, Thomas? How did you get into ultimately becoming the director of marine programs for the Nature Conservancy?
Sure. I was a graduate student at the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg, and my graduate work happened to be on the barrier islands on the coast. So Horn Island, Petty Boy, Ship Island. And it just so happened a position opened up at the National Park Service, and I worked there for about 4 to 5 years in various stewardship and resource management positions. And then about 12 years ago, I started up with the Nature Conservancy in a new position they just created for the coastal program that I now oversee.
That's cool. Incidentally, what a great graduate work to be involved in. Incidentally, I would say postgraduate, which I don't mean it literally. I just mean after I graduated, I spent a lot of time at those islands too, fishing and swimming and boating and just really kind of taking it all in and understanding this unbelievable resource we have in the Barrier Islands off of coastal Mississippi. Ultimately, actually became the first president of Friends of the National Seashore program, a 501(c) that ultimately rebuilt the Ship Island Lighthouse just before Katrina, and it got washed away. But then they rebuilt it in Gulfport so that we wouldn't be in a position where it'd get washed away again out on the islands. But Man, are we fortunate to have those barrier islands or what?
No, it's a very romantic, uh, scenic place to be. I mean, it's an awesome place to just relax and explore. And I had the good fortune of being able to camp out there for several days on an end. And there are challenges to that, but it's also something I don't know that I'd be able to get to do again. And
Yeah.
I look at those memories, and it was challenging. It was there out there. I admit it, but and the serenity is unmatched. So.
It is, man. Of course, you have to deal with sand flies or fleas, whatever they are, and horse flies and heat, and it's all there. But if you prepare for that, it can be a terrific overnight stay. What a great kind of getting back to nature experience that is. As the director of the marine programs, what do you we'll come to the pilot program around the oyster shells here in a second. But what all are you focused on?
So there are a couple of main things that we're organized around. One would be community resiliency. So things like water management, coastal defenses, things like living shorelines and ways to mitigate against hazards. And then the other is habitat restoration and conservation. So working on subtidal oysters, for example. In the past, we've had projects looking at seagrass conservation, and we've done some work on coastal streams previously as well.
It's pretty cool. So how long have you been doing this particular job?
I just had my 12-year anniversary last month.
Good. Yeah, that's really cool. We talk a lot about the Mississippi Sound. What a unique body of water it is. I mean, it's sort of tailor-made for seafood and all of that. It's unfortunate. We won't get in. That's not what this conversation is about. But it's unfortunate we have to deal with the Bonnie Carey spillway, and then now we've got another diversion project that could in some ways affect the Mississippi Sound. The Mississippi Sound was not set up to have large volumes of polluted water, fresh water come pouring into it. It just wasn't. But what's amazing to me, though, is that, you think back at, Hurricane Katrina and the Bonnie Carey opening and the algae, the subsequent algae bloom that came from that. And it's an incredible, resilient body of water, isn't it?
Well, there's a reason it was a seafood capital of the world for, many, many years, going back quite a ways. But it's got some stuff to it that is really good for marine habitat, fisheries, and production. And I think if we can get a handle on some of the issues, then it will be productive for hopefully our lifetimes and beyond. So.
Well, listen, we'll move now to the Save Our Shells program that you guys are doing. It was awesome to read at the SuperTalk Mississippi news site the story about it by Caleb Sellers. And I was glad to see, for example, Austin Sumrall, who owns the White Pillars, is a terrific chef. He's been on this show many times, great friend of Coast Vue. Just thrilled to see him understand why it's important for us to do this program. So why don't we do this? Kind of start from where the vision for this came from, and then building the program to the point now that we're launching this pilot program.
Sure. So Oyster Shell Recycling isn't a new idea. There are at least 15 programs throughout the country in coastal states. The other Gulf states, Louisiana, Texas, Alabama, and Florida, all have multiple programs to collect and recycle oyster shells. And typically they're very localized to an area where there's concentrated restaurants and the source for material. The challenge is making sure that the cost of collection and coordination doesn't outweigh the value of the material itself. So you can't be having a cost of, like, say, $200 a cubic yard of material when it's selling on the market for $75, for example. So that the big challenge that we're trying to figure out at this point is making sure that cost per unit is effective enough to make it worth our while. And the first phase of this project was actually an economic study to look into that. And we think there's enough material. The layout of the Gulf Coast in Mississippi is very linear along Highway 90 with the distribution of restaurants. So we think logistically it is cost effective to collect that material to bring it back to coastal waters.
Thomas, where does it go now?
Right now, just simply into restaurants' typical trash collection. So it's going to go into a dumpster. There have been smaller efforts by individuals to collect shells, sometimes for art projects or one-off type programs. But this is the first time there's dedicated funding for a couple. We have funding for 2 years currently to run this pilot.
So why don't we do this right at the end of the segment? But when we come back on the other side, we'll talk about rolling this plan out and how they're going to, test their economic study to see if this is something we can do long term. I hope it is. Actually, be terrific for us to be able to do that. But we'll continue the conversation with Thomas Mohrman, who's director of marine programs for the Nature Conservancy of Mississippi. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to Coast Vue. We have Thomas Mohrman with us. He's the Director of Marine Programs for the Nature Conservancy of Mississippi, an organization that I have tremendous respect for. Work with the Executive Director of the Nature Conservancy, Alex Littlejohn, on a lot of different projects along the way, not the least of which was the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. But he's just a terrific leader in the outdoors community. And a year or so ago, he and Thomas and I visited about this Save Our Oysters SOS oyster recycling program. And it seems to me you did your economic study, and so now you say maybe there's some viability here, particularly when you consider that Highway 90 sort of connects us, and it will make gathering of these oysters a little bit more feasible. But what was interesting in reading the story is that it's clear that what you had to do next, though, is you had to go spend some time on the ground, bringing restaurant owners and chefs and whoever up to speed on what the plan is here, so they would actively, not just actively, but enthusiastically be a part of this program. And it seems like you had a lot of success in that regard.
Sure. So first off, I just want to mention that this project is funded through an award by the Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality in partnership with the Restore Council. So there's lots of partners on this project. We developed a technical advisory team that includes some restaurants, chef owners, as well as academic partners and folks from the commercial fishing community. And as part of that economic study, we conducted surveys of restaurants to get a kind of an idea of how many would be willing to participate, how many restaurants actually serve oysters on the half shell, and what kind of volume of material. And I think that was all pretty interesting and eye-opening. We were able to identify 51 restaurants. This is October of 2 years ago, I guess 2021, now that we did the survey, and we found 51 restaurants that sell oysters on the half shell. And they go through about 5 million oysters annually, shucking them in place. So that's a good chunk of material. That's about 1.5 million pounds. And if we can just tap into like a half of that, or even 30%, I think we have a viable program, and we can collect enough material to make it worth our while.
So once you get the material collected, talk about the what's next in all of this.
Sure. So you have to go through a process where you cure and store the shells to make sure that any organic matter that's left on them, it decomposes, and that the material is suitable to be put back into the water. We're planning to work with the Department of Marine Resources here in the state, and we'd really like to deliver this material to them because they're already set up to distribute shell for restoration, whether it's out to an oyster reef or it's to put it on what they would call a remote setting, or put baby oysters on the shell in the future. So that's kind of that certainly helps with the economic side of making this program viable. So those partnerships are definitely key.
And you said the point is really it's not a question of whether this is a viable approach, because this is being used. It's sort of a proven approach to growing oysters, but the issue is whether you can do it economically. Is that the bottom line?
I think so. Yeah, that's what we did the study on the front end, and the next 2 years is to basically confirm the assumptions that we've made, either identify how much material we can collect at what cost, and keep building from there. So coming up, I guess Saturday really is really an important day for you guys. Yeah. So one of the big partners of this program in the past has been the commercial fishing community, and they've been collecting oyster shells for up to 7 years at the annual Gulf Coast Oyster Cook-Off, which is this Saturday, March 25th, at Point Cadet in Biloxi. So we're doing kind of what we're calling a soft launch of the program, where we will be collecting shells from the contestants in the cook-off and other vendors, but also promoting the program. It's an opportunity for me to hopefully interact with some chefs and restaurant owners that I haven't met yet, and get them signed on. But it's a chance to collect some material, but also get the word out and start organizing around information about the program, and hopefully encourage other restaurants to participate, because ultimately the key to success is going to have the most number of restaurants we can possibly sign up participating and contributing shell to the program.
Hey, one of the things that you pick up quickly when you start a program like this is that people really like oysters, don't they?
There's lots of ways to prepare them, and everyone's got an opinion on their favorite. So it's the cook-off, I think, is a great opportunity. I'm not advertising necessarily, but you'll be able to see multiple vendors providing different styles of oysters, where you can have a big variety of samplings that you wouldn't necessarily get at one restaurant.
And so it's interesting too. We've done several shows here about the rising trend of aquaculture here in coastal Mississippi as well. So it's really cool, working to bring back the traditional way that oysters were tongued for, but then also the growth in aquaculture. It's all about meeting demand, because people just love their oysters, and that's one of the beautiful things about being in coastal Mississippi. Mm-hmm. Thomas, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend. Thank you so much. It was great to be on the show. Good luck with your program. I look forward to checking back with you and see how things are going. Have a great day, my friend. Okay. Anyway, have a great weekend, and we will see you Monday.